Hey everybody, Doug here from 2 Plus Stuff, hanging out and chilling with y'all. We're going to be talking about Lumineth Realm Lords today. So, just to throw it out there, first of all, while I'm rambling, can someone please in the chat just tell me, make sure everything looks and sounds okay as far as the music, volume, and that kind of stuff. But while I'm getting a response from there, I wanted to say that I do my lore videos like a week in advance. Like I'm always working on next week's videos. And I didn't expect to get my Lumineth Realm Lords book until next weekend. And so sadly, this week's actually going to be Orcs for 40k, and then next week will be the full lore breakdown for the Lumineth Realm Lords. Because I wanted to give it time, you know, I could have stayed up all night and made a bunch of crappy videos where I missed details, but I wanted to give it justice, you know. So there's a lot of lore in there that is incredible, but today we're going to be talking more about the oh, awesome, everything seems to be working awesome, thank you all so much. But today we're going to be talking about more of the list building, the units, and that kind of thing, because I got the book yesterday and I've done a pretty good job of avoiding rumors, and so I had very fresh eyes looking at it, and it was very, very, very interesting. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to basically go section by section. We'll talk about allegiance abilities, battalions, stuff like that. And the way that I'll do this is, if you've ever joined me for one of these before, I did it for Slanesh as well, where basically I cover one section. So like, we're going to talk about allegiance abilities, and then I'll pause. We can, you know, answer some questions in the chat, this is why these videos tend to be really fun, is because they're more interactive than me just reading the book to you. And so, we'll go ahead and we'll start jumping into that. So I will let you know kind of when I open things up for questions, because there are so many folks in the chat right now. I want to make sure that we don't miss any. So let's head down to the... Oh, let me get rid of that painting cam thing here. We ain't painting today. Today we're power gaming, I guess. So here we have, and I tried a new lighting setup to kind of ease up on the glare. This light right above me tends to be kind of harsh. First of all, this is a beautiful Battletome, and it even has a little divider thing to keep your place. I love it. So we're going to skip the lore as I'm still reading it and digesting it. There is a lot in here about Teclis, Tyrion, the nature of Hysh. This is actually probably one of the more interesting, you know, it's like... compare it to like orcs, where orcs are everywhere and they're kind of the same wherever they are. And they take on different variations realm to realm. That's very interesting. But like in terms of new information, I think this is probably one of the more interesting Battletomes. So, but we're going to move past that real quick. Okay. Here's the lore for the various not storm hosts, whatever you call them. And we're almost there. There are very few war scrolls in this book, and they make up for it with an impressive painting section, which is actually something that I quite like. So, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off talking about the allegiance abilities again. Then I'll pause afterwards, and we'll open it up to discussion here. What we got here is Ether Quartz Reserve. This is something that we're seeing a lot more in different Battletomes, where you have command points as a resource, but then some armies have a secondary resource that they can use to do in-game effects. A big one being Ossiarch Bone Reapers. What else? Carriage and Overlords have the Ether Gold they can hold on to or something like that. So they have their own. Each unit in a Lumineth Realm Lords army starts the battle with one Ether Quartz Reserve. Interesting to note, it doesn't separate characters or anything like that. It's just if you are a Lumineth in this army, boom, you got it. Once per phase, you can say that one unit will use its Ether Quartz Reserve to use one of the following reserve abilities. However, if you do, subtract one from that unit's bravery characteristic for the rest of the battle. I want to start off by saying, I think that last sentence, subtract one bravery, as I was reading this, I was like, that's so dumb. Like, what a stupid thing to tack on just to have one more thing to follow, but it does get more interesting. There's a reason that -1 is there, that's what I'm trying to say. So, that goes down, and so there are 4 abilities you can use with your Ether Quartz. Again, every single unit has them. You can say that a unit will use this ability when it is picked to be the target of an enemy attack. If you do so, add 1 to the save rolls. That is awesome. So yeah, once per game, buff up your save. You can say that a unit will use this ability when it is picked to shoot or fight. Add 1 to hit rolls. Awesome. You can say that a unit will use this ability after it has attempted to cast a spell, but before any unbinding rolls are made. If you do so, you can either add 1 to the casting roll or re-roll it. So for your heroes who are spellcasters, actually every unit in this book is a spellcaster, so that actually helps all of them. But it gives you a chance to either buff it into hopefully getting it into a range where your opponent is not likely to be able to unbind it, or dispel it, I mean, you know what I mean? Or on the flip side, it's just, you can just straight reroll. So that's cool. And the last one is Magical Insight. You can say that a unit will use this ability at the start of the hero phase. If they do so, they can attempt to cast 1 extra spell. And when we go through the spell lore, y'all, there's some heavy stuff here. Like, we was talking about it with Jack last night and rerolling ones, and we're just like chatting through some of this stuff. It's very, very interesting. So keep that in mind. Now, they do have kind of 2 different kinds of units. They have what are called Vanari and Alarith. Vanari are typically like the normal troops. You got your spearmen, you got your horse boys, the bowmen, that kind of stuff. Alarith are the more mountainous types of stuff. He's the stone monk who's meditating, the big cow guys, even the what's the model that nobody or people are making fun of with the big cow helmets? They're not the sentinels. What are they called? Dawn Riders, Wardens, Stoneguard. And it's kind of strange that they wrote it out like this, but these are also kind of allegiance abilities. They have battle traits, they call them, but we'll get to that in a sec. So as far as allegiance abilities go, this is where I'm going to talk about that -1 kind of factoring into stuff. Absorb Despair is an allegiance ability. If a friendly unit uses its Ether Quartz Reserve while it's within 18 inches of any friendly Cathallars, it's one of the heroes. It's the hero lady who has the hair blowing in her face like it's a bad, I don't know, MTV music video. If they do that within 18 inches of that unit, they can say that they will absorb negative energy. A Cathallar cannot absorb negative energy more than once per phase. If it absorbs the negative energy from a friendly unit, do not subtract 1 from the unit's bravery characteristic when they use the Ether Quartz or Gold. Do not subtract 1 from the bravery characteristic. Instead, you can pick 1 enemy unit within 18 inches of that Cathallar. If you do so, subtract 1 from bravery characteristic of that enemy unit for the rest of the battle. And you can't stack it. You can't keep doing this over and over again to the same unit. But we're going to talk about the fact that bravery all of a sudden matters with this book in a meaningful way. And we're going to talk about that when it gets to the spell lores. I like it quite a bit. And this one, the last one here as far as allegiance abilities, and then I'll open it up to questions. So if you have a question, start typing it out. Lightning reactions. This is sort of the spiritual successor to Always Fights First. If you remember in High Elves in the old edition, not old edition, in Fantasy Battles, a different game, used to have Always Fights First. During the combat phase, when it's your turn to pick a unit to fight, remember this is combat phase, it's both you and your opponents. You can pick 2 eligible units instead of 1. If you do so, each of those units can fight one after the other in the order of your choice. So if you have multiple combats, you really can sucker punch your enemy very, very hard. And in fact, there's something I want to touch on here where the units that we're going to cover individually are not spectacular. There are not a lot of, like, if you just look at their war scroll out of context, they're not winners. However, when you start stacking allegiance abilities and spells and that kind of stuff, they all hit way above their weight class, like in a significant way. And I'm going to go ahead and just open it up here. If you have a question or you comment on what we just talked about with the allegiance abilities specifically, go ahead and type it into the chat. Just make sure you tag me or say Doug, question, something like that, so I can see it. But and then the last little bit here while you guys are chatting is it just has that rules for like picking. They call them great nations instead of storm hosts, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. I love the ether quartz thing is interesting because my initial reaction is to say I don't want to keep track of one more thing, but all of these abilities you get from them are much more interesting than say triumphs, right? Like triumph where you get if you have less models than your or less points than your opponent, that kind of thing. As far as absorb despair, I don't like that it's tied to a specific hero. I'm not a fan of the model of the how do I say it's like the model that is the Cathallar or whatever. Unless we'll double check the keywords, but I think she's the only one who has it. But the bravery thing is enticing when we start getting more into the book. I got a question here from Bladeskrieg. Question: which heroes are considered Yanari / normal elves? So Yanari, I believe, is a 40k thing. Let's see. I believe it is. I think their word is Vanari. Okay, yep, I see what you're saying. There's a simple mix-up. Vanari. So who are Vanari? We'll check that out real quick because that is a good question. Vanari. Let's see. We have Teclis is not. Light of Eltharion's not. We have. So the Dawn Riders, the cavalry, the sentinels, who are the bowmen, the wardens, who are the shield and spear guys. That's it, I believe. Because everything else, all the other troop choices they have are Alarith, which is like the mountain-themed dudes. So it basically, yeah, so when you see Vanari, think basic infantry, sort of. You know, there's your basic infantry in terms of cavalry. I don't know why that was so hard to say. Bow and arrow and swords. And so, don't see question. Can we just refer to ether quartz as milk points? If you've ever seen the what's his name, Pro ZD on YouTube, I think it is. He has a great video about making fun of Magic the Gathering, and they have like a cow-themed Magic the Gathering deck, and he calls them dairy dollars. I'm like, that's what I'm going to start calling these things. You get one dairy dollar. Okay. Cool. I'm going to move on from that since I don't see how much. I'm going to tack these two on real quick. These are the battle traits, and they're basically allegiance abilities, but they're different in the sense that you only get them if you take these specific units. Like if you only take a list that has Vanari or heroes that don't have the Alarith keyword, you don't get these rules. And that's kind of, I think, the reason that they split it all up. Question, not really, but you skipped lightning reactions or whatever they called. No, I didn't. I talked about that, where you pick 2 eligible units instead of 1. I did mention it. Maybe I went too fast, but that is a super good ability. You skipped. Okay, we'll move on. Sorry, I'm just making sure I'm not missing any comments. I want to talk about the battle traits, so to speak, for Vanari. After a Vanari unit is set up, if the base of each model in the unit is touching the bases of at least 2 or more other models from the same unit, then it becomes a quote-unquote shining company. And we saw this in a like a preview thing, where basically if you are a shining company, and you can remain that way until basically that coherency that describes, where every model is in contact with 2 or more of the same unit, until that breaks. It could break from you moving out of place and you have a guy who's off on his own just because you forgot what your rules were, or it could be that, you know, they're taking casualties, and as you pull them away, all of a sudden one dude doesn't have 2 bases next to him. But when you are a shining company, subtract 1 from hit rolls that target a shining company. However, a shining company cannot run or charge, and models in that unit can only move 1 inch when they pile in. Which might seem bad, but I want you to put a pin in that until we get to our spells. But the idea of, you know, moving forward onto objective and making a shield wall that is now -1 to hit with some of the other save bonuses that we can get in this army is really not a bad thing. Like, it's really not. Let's see here. We're just covering the allegiance abilities. We'll get to the individual war scroll stuff here Tectonic Craft Studios. Everyone go buy his products. He's an awesome person. That's Dan. All right, and then I want to cover the Alarith ones. Or the Alarith. Theirs is called Enduring as a Rock. After armies have been set up, but before the first battle round begins, at the start of any of your hero phases, you can pick any number of friendly Alarith units and say they are adopting the mountain stance. Which I don't know what that is, but that sounds awesome. If you do so, until your next hero phase, if the weapon used for an attack that targets an Alarith unit in the mountain stance has a rend characteristic of -1, change the rend characteristic to dash. So you basically, you get immunity from rend 1. Which is alright. I mean, when you start combining stuff that we'll talk about later, you can make things pretty defensible just by sapping away your opponent's effectiveness. Not so much by having the best units in this book. It's a very cagey kind of army. And their second thing is Tectonic Force. At the end of each combat phase, you can pick one enemy unit within 1 inch of each friendly Alarith unit. You cannot pick the same enemy unit more than once in the same phase. After you pick each unit, your opponent must move that unit 2 inches, and that unit must finish the move more than 1 inch from any Alarith units on the table. Now, remember, Alarith units are your big giant cows, your stone monk who's meditating, and the bullhead elite guys with the big mega hammers. And so the idea of this is one I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I don't quite see why this is a good thing. Like, I understand the idea of pushing your opponent back and why that kind of stuff might. Let's see if we can get a little more light in that side. Oh, it looks way better. Like I get some of it. I guess when I think about that ability, I more just get caught up in like how annoying it is to move a unit 2 inches back, especially if it's something like 40 clan rats or something like that. So there's that. There's artifacts and command traits in this book, okay? And obviously that's not a big surprise. Pretty much every book's had them. Alex Butler, yeah, you hit it. This one could backfire when they move around you, and it slows the game down massively. That's the thing where I'm like, I could do this. I made a joke when they previewed that role of just like, I'm trying to imagine 2 intense power gamers at each other at an event, and one's like, I'm going to call a TO over because you're slow playing me, and then the Skaven player on the other side's like, well, quit making me move my 40-man blocks. And they just kind of go back and forth. Anyway, there are, like I said, command traits and artifacts, but here's the thing about this book. There are exactly 2 non-named heroes. Let's see. You have the Cathallar, the lady with her hair getting blown in the breeze, we talked about before, and the Stone Mage, the guy who's meditating. These are not exciting command traits. I'm honestly going to breeze kind of past them. I mean, they're cool stuff, like you can make them better spellcasters, which is cool, admittedly. You can... you can add 3 wounds to the stone monk guy. Like, all these kinds of things, they are cool, but the real gas in the engine for this army is going to be centered around narrative characters. And, yeah. Very, very interesting. Let's see. I'm going to pause there for a second, and then we're going to talk about the spell lores. There are 2, and fun fact, Teclis knows all of them. That's a fun thing. Because now all of a sudden you're going to start seeing stuff really ramp up. I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to look at the chat here to make sure I'm not missing much. Go ahead and ask your question if I didn't answer it before. Maybe Voldemort says, shield wall giving -1 to hit seems weird. Seems like it would be easier to hit them. Yeah, I could see that. I guess I'm more thinking the sheer length of these spears makes it so that it's hard to get into combat with them, maybe? I don't know. Tectonic force equals beat back, more or less. Pretty much, yeah. Exactly right. Yeah, you just push them physically backward. -1 to hit is vastly more powerful than affecting wounds or saves, though, since it affects every attack, not just those that hit. That's a good point. Okay. Tyrion next edition. I have no idea. I haven't read his lore part here. Question: does the forced movement of opponent mean the opponent can use the movement to encircle you? As written, yes. They just need to move back 2 inches, but moving backward, you could kind of extend it around the side. The only qualification for where you end that movement is that you're outside of an inch. So that does give you an inch to go like sideways. You're moving 2 inches, but you're still staying outside 1. So I don't think it's going to be an all the time ability that I want to use. What is great is that if we're talking about scenario play, 2 inches of pushing an army backward or even side to side, it can very easily take someone, if you're close and tied on an objective, like like who's claiming it, it can push you in that direction. And that's kind of what I was thinking. Are there any units in the book we didn't see in the previews? Nope. It's a very small faction. Very few units. Spezia. Yeah, the shield wall kind of makes sense with the phalanx style of gear. What do you think will be the power of this book relative to others? Speaking at a high level, we're going to get into why I think what I think in the lore, in the spell lore section. I think they are not going to be... This is just knee-jerk reaction, and you're not talking to a competitive player. But I don't see them winning a lot of major events, but I do see them spoiling a lot of power gamer lists. Like they're the spoiler army. They can come in and just present a totally unique problem that is going to get some votes. That's what I would say. So I think they would do really well. You need someone who can resource manage all of the ether quartz, dairy dollars as we're calling them, that kind of stuff. You need someone who can really master that and magic and make the most of all the spells. But I think they can do extremely well. They don't have the raw like rend and damage output of many other armies. So I don't know. But I'd love to see them expand it in the future. So we'll move on. Talk about spell lores. This is what I was talking about when I said it gets spicy. I'm not going to go through every single one of them. I'm just going to hit up, because a lot of these are just like different ways of doing basic mortal wounds. They're really not that interesting. But some of them are incredible. Like, for example, Speed of Hish. Casting value of only 5. That's amazing. Pick one friendly... I want to clarify here. So there's 2 spell lores. One of them is Teclis, the Light of Eltharion, who's the hollow man in the armor. Cathallars, the girl blowing in the breeze, and Vanari. Vanari Wizards is all of the units in this book. All the basic dudes. Your pikemen, bow guys, horse boys. And on this one, it is only Teclis and Alarith. Those are the stoneguard and big cow guys. But Teclis knows everything from both. Okay. So Speed of Hish. Casting value 5. Pick one friendly Lumineth Realm Lord's unit, wholly within 18 of the caster and visible to them. Double the move characteristic of that unit until your next hero phase. That is an awesome spell. Doubling the move characteristic. Now understand, we were just talking about the Shining Companies before, the Vanari shield wall that makes them -1 to hit. They can't run or charge, but they can still move as long as they end that movement in the Shining Company coherency thing. So if you do this, now you have a 12-inch move, -1 to hit, wall of dudes that can just launch themselves forward for a turn. I like that quite a bit. Where was the next big one? This is one where you basically just pick a point in the battlefield and it does damage. You can reroll... What is this? Pick one enemy unit within 18 inches of the caster and visible to them. Until your next hero phase, you can reroll hit rolls for attacks made with missile weapons against that target unit. So you can pick a guy and be like, screw that guy, and then all your archers get way better at shooting at him, which is really nice. Especially because you can stack that with the ether quartz where they get +1 to hit. So you can have a turn where it is just devastating fire. They can give basically a unit ethereal. It's called Ethereal Blessing, which is awesome. What's great is that Ethereal doesn't affect rerolls, and there are several ways to get rerolls to your save in this book. So you can make them pretty tanky. Total Eclipse. This is the one that I'm talking about, okay? This is to me the most interesting based on the games that I have personally played. Total Eclipse has a casting value of 8, so it's up there. If successfully cast, until your next hero phase, your opponent must spend 2 command points to use a command ability instead of 1. That is a straight kick in the nuts for so many factions. I love it. And that's one of those things where I say it's going to be a spoiler army. Like, it does nothing to Ossiarch Bone Reapers because they don't use command points. They have their own internal resource. But for a lot of other factions, whether they use command points to do stuff like Inspiring Presence, all of a sudden, that's really stinking expensive. And remember, it is until my next hero phase as the caster. So if you double turn me, that's now 2 turns of yours where all of your command abilities cost double, or cost 2 points, you know what I mean? So, I love that. That is quite possibly my favorite spell in this book, where it's not taking anything away from you, it's not even doing any damage, it's just making it really hard for you to do what you want. Alex Butler says, I hate this rule. It takes away your opponent's ability to play their army how they want. I would agree with you if this was a more impressive army. But we're going to look at the units and stuff. They're going to be a pain in the tail, but you will easily dislodge them. That's why I say I don't think they're going to win anything. I think they're going to be there to make some games extremely tough. For some army lists and builds and things like that. And I also wouldn't be surprised if in the future Games Workshop started slowly moving away from command points, like giving all of them their internal stuff like that. Maybe Voldemort says it's just so anti-fun. It's super strong, but not super fun to play against. I don't know. We have to try. We have to try first. Because when you think of stuff like, what's a good example? What are some common command abilities here? It just makes you make a tougher choice. I honestly don't think it's going to be like a sore spot. You know, when I compare it to things that I think are not fun, like Legions of Nagash with like 120 skeletons, it doesn't rank up there very high. But that's just an opinion. And again, all this is opinions until we can get back to gaming. Or I guess until the rest of the faction comes out too. And the last one is Protection of Hysh, which basically gives you a 5-up shrug against wounds and mortal wounds, that kind of thing. So that's it from there. Like, really, again, there's like 3 really shining examples of great spells. I wouldn't be surprised if they added onto this the Total Eclipse one that we were talking about. If there was something that said this can be used once per battle. That wouldn't be a bad thing, right? Because then it would just give you 1 turn. I don't know. I'm not... But I'm also not the kind of person who would cast the same spell every single turn. You know? I don't know. Let's see. I don't plan to bring my squigs to the table anymore. Oh, that's a poor opinion. Bring them. They're fun. Okay, and then the spell lore for the Alarith, the mountain folks. That one's not impressive. It's Don't Take Battle Shock. This one's fun. Crippling Vertigo. It's a casting value of 6. If cast, pick 1 enemy unit wholly within 18 inches of the caster, invisible to them. Until your next hero phase, roll 2d6 before that unit makes a normal move, a charge move, or a pile-in move. If the roll is greater than that unit's bravery characteristic, it cannot make that move. So that is super interesting. Just the idea of it makes them scared to move. I like that. I don't know why. I mean, it can be a real pain for some of those big horde units, but I think it's pretty awesome. Living Fissure is one of those things where you draw a line and it just destroys stuff that's near it. And that's it. There are some real stinkers, though. There's this one that it had Jack and I kind of scratching our heads. Called of Assault of Stone. This is not a great one. Has a casting value of 8, which is high. Pick 1 enemy unit wholly within 24 inches of the caster, invisible to them, and roll a number of dice equal to the casting roll. So let's say you get a 10, okay? Just to make the numbers really easy. For each roll that is less than the unit's save characteristic, it suffers 1 mortal wound. Okay, so they have a 5-up save. Anything less than a 5 would do a mortal wound. But there's also this caveat here that rolls of 1 or 2 always fail to inflict a mortal wound on the target. Well, that just means that the window you have is you're looking for 3s, and then at the minimum, right? And then 3s wouldn't even affect something like Stormcast Paladins. There's only 3 up. I don't know. It's all over the place. So, then we move. I'm going to pause there, actually. And we're going to discuss a little bit. Does anyone else have any more thoughts on the spell lores? Like I said, the fact that every unit can cast something, you're going to see some spells used quite a bit. Unbinding Total Eclipse is going to be key for many factions who want to do exactly what they want with their command points. And then some other ones. There's just a lot of cool ways to do a little bit of damage. My favorite one is the Speed of Hish, just being able to launch units forward at full speed. The fact that you have cavalry in here that go 14 inches, well, now it's 28, and they can still charge. Like, they're just in your face. Teclis is 660. Yes, I just saw Gondor 21. Let's see. Okay, looks like we're having a debate about Teclis here. We'll move into him here pretty quickly. I'm going to skip past the Great Nations, their Stormhost equivalent for right now, because I want us to understand the units and how they affect them, to give us some context. I am going to say I'm a little bit bummed that I feel like one of these is just a standout amongst the others, and I don't like when they do that with sub-factions. Actually, there's 2 that are really good, but one that I think people are going to go for is the Great Nation of Siar, which is every unit starts the battle with 2 Ether Quartz instead of 1, which is just flat amazing, right? Being able to do whatever special thing they need to do twice in a game. There's not a lot of ways, as far as I can tell, to get those refunded. I didn't see anything off the top of my head. The Eumetrica is all about the stone people, the Alarith. The Siar, I haven't read their lore quite yet, but all about military formations. Iliatha is, what are these? These guys are about bravery. They kind of manipulate bravery a lot. Which, you know, if you start making Inspiring Presence cost 2 command points, bravery all of a sudden matters. It matters a lot. And there's a lot of bravery manipulation within this book. And so I think that's kind of what they were gunning for. That's just my gut reaction. And the last ones are about magic. Sorry, I didn't cover them. Zertrek, which is actually kind of the one aesthetically in terms of like a paint scheme that I'm leaning towards. I love kind of the mauve and gold there. They basically add 1 to the first casting, dispelling, and unbinding rolls you make for each wizard in each hero phase. There you go. So that's pretty cool. They also get a special spell, which is just like Fireball. It's nothing really to write home about. As far as battalions go, there are 4. One of them is a mega battalion. It's going to clock in at like 5,000 points, so I'm going to go ahead and ignore that here. Eric Hirth asks a great question. Won't removing 2 Milkstones reduce their leadership by 2? It will, unless if you remember the allegiance ability that they have, where if there's a Cathallar hero, the lady getting her hair blown around, she can basically take that -1 and throw it on an enemy unit. So you could double down. And the way that these battalions work, they're all interesting. As far as the 3 that are functional within a 2,000 point game, you have one where it is the Alarith focus, so it's the stone guys. You have the named character or the non-named version of the mountain cow, 1 stone mage, and 1 to 3 units of stoneguard. And I like this one a lot. Basically, this is the one where at the start of the combat phase, any stoneguard units from this battalion that are wholly within 12 inches of a friendly hero from the same battalion can turn their skin to stone until the end of that phase. You can reroll save rolls for attacks that target a unit that has turned itself to stone, but models in a unit that have turned to stone can only move 1 inch when they pile in. So it depends. The idea of them being able to turn themselves to stone, and there's ways to give them ethereal and that kind of stuff. I don't know. I like it. especially because those are some of my favorite models. I do like the big cow guys. The Auroral Legions, which is basically it's all your basic dudes, right? You have the Cathallar, who can pass away the negative effects of Ether Quartz. 2 to 4 units of the bow guys, the spear guys, and the sentinels. 2 to 4 units of sentinels, and an equal number unit of wardens. So that's your spear guys and your bow guys. And their bonus is super, super sad. You can reroll save rolls of 1 for attacks that target a friendly unit from this battalion while it's within 3 inches of any other unit. So reroll save rolls of 1. We're going to see their saves are not great. It's not awesome. The stone guys they have enough damage output to kind of warrant, oh, we can keep these guys alive. And there's a few different buffs to kind of make them stronger and more resilient. I don't really see this one getting taken a lot unless you just want an artifact, which is legit. And the last one, the one that honestly interests me the most, is the Dawn Rider Lance. 2 to 3 units of the Dawn Riders, the cavalry unit. Reroll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made by melee weapons on a friendly unit from this battalion when it's made a charge move in the same turn. Now we're gonna look at that war scroll, but if you had seen it on the Warhammer preview thing, they can drop buckets of attacks. Like they are crazy good chaff clearers. And so even just a 5-man unit, rerolling hit rolls of 1 is phenomenal. Because they already hit really well. That's not including any other buffs they get. It's just them walking up and hitting somebody. So yeah. Actually, I'm going to pause right there. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about the battalions before I go on? Because y'all are being awesome. Good chat today, everybody. What we got? When using a stone, the unit also uses 1 bravery. So if they use 2, they lose 2. Yes, that's my understanding. She can only take -1 bravery from that unit. Yeah, there's a bit of confusion. So the way that works, because it is a little odd, and that's why I don't think I'll use it too much. But she can only do her ability where she takes a -1 and puts it on an enemy unit once per phase. So if you had 2 units that both use ether quartz, because to my understanding you probably can't use 2 at the same time. Yeah, once per phase you can say that it will use 1. So you can't double up. Like you can't take 2 of the heightened senses in the same phase and get +2 to your hit rolls, for example. You would be only able to do 1, and she can pass that off once per phase. What that does mean is that if you have 2 units of archers, for example, and they both use the same heightened senses, because it's in the same phase, the shooting phase, she can only help one of them, and the other one will still have that -1. So there's a little bit of mitigation there, and it's such a small debuff that I'm like, I don't know, that does not entice me to bring that chick to toss a -1 on an enemy, but maybe in the future I'll think about it more. So yeah, let's see. Yeah, the battalion is awesome for the Dawn Rider Lance. Sorry, I was reading the chat. We're going to get into some of the units, and the only reason I'm going unit by unit this time is because there's like not many. Before doing that, I just want to say really quickly that when it comes to building this army, it is, I think, going to be rather elite. And the reason I say that is not because every single model costs a ton. Like your basic spearmen, the Dawn Riders, the archer guys, they're all very, very reasonably costed, to the point where you could have a whole swarm of them. But a lot of the synergies and the power and the access to cooler things come from having heroes. And the named heroes, which make up the majority of the heroes in this book, are pricey AF. Teclis is 660. What's Eltharion? Where is he at? The Light of Eltharion, he's 220, but for just a dude running around poking stuff with a sword, that's a lot. So, yeah, just kind of keep that in mind, that when you're seeing these abilities, you're like, whoa, that's incredible. It's like, okay, well, Teclis is supposed to be the god of magic, and he takes up almost half your army. I personally would always want a battalion in there to get more artifacts and command points and that kind of thing. So just kind of keep that in mind. That it's not going to be this overwhelming tide of dudes all doing this. It's largely going to be a couple of heroes, which are Eric Hirth just put there. I feel like the named characters are an auto-include. I'm not going to say auto-include, but I will say it does truly seem like the faction is based around them. So in a narrative mission, I probably wouldn't take Teclis, because God doesn't show up to every fight, but in a match play thing, you better believe it. So we'll kick it off with talking about, let's see, we're going to take a look at Teclis here, and I'm not going to go super deep because they did kind of spoil his thing before, but basically when he goes to cast a spell, or at the start of the hero phase, I should say, he decides how many spells he wants to cast. You can say you're going to cast 1, 2, or 4. If the model will cast one spell, when it attempts to do so, it is automatically cast. It cannot be unbound. If you choose one spell, it's like it will happen. It is inevitable. If he casts 2 spells, you still don't roll. They count as having 12. So we think about that ability I mentioned before, where it's like, you know, take the number of whatever the value of your casting roll was, and that's how many dice you roll to see if you do mortal wounds. Now you're choosing, okay, 12, straight up. If it casts 4 spells, when it attempts to cast those spells, each is automatically cast without rolling, with a casting roll of 10. And the reason that they give specific numbers is that it cannot be modified. Enemy wizards can attempt to unbind these spells. So there are ways for wizards who have bonuses to unbind to get around them. You can shut it down, and that's really what it comes down to. Is like if I'm playing Nagash, or I guess like a bunch of Lord of Changes that really have access to a lot of unbind bonuses, I'm going to look more at the more elite things. I need to rein in how many spells I'm actually casting. Whereas if it's, you know, say like an orc player that they don't have a lot of bonuses, I can go nuts. I can do the 4 and pretty reliably get all of them off. So that's pretty cool. He adds 1 to the casting, dispelling, and unbinding rolls for friendly Lumineth Realm Lord units, which is everything. And they're all wizards. That's pretty great. And his range for that aura does go down as he gets hurt. Now, one thing that's crazy is a few things. One, the god of this army has no command ability, which is, I think, interesting. In addition, each time a friendly unit within the range of this model's aura is affected by an endless spell, or a spell that's cast on a wizard, you can roll a die, and basically he gives you spell protection. He doesn't have his own intrinsic super save. Like, he doesn't have a 5-up shrug, nothing like that. He is just a 16 wound model with a 4-up save. Even the Glotkin has like disgusting resilient or something like that. You know what I mean? Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't. I might be wrong about that one. But you know what I mean? Like, it's a big model. It's a centerpiece hero, but it doesn't have any kind of like shrug or super save. He is quite squishy if you want him to be. He does have a spell that gives him a 5-up shrug, but that's, again, you're now taking away from his abilities to do other stuff. And I do think that matters. His 2 unique spells, the one that gives you a 5-up shrug, as well as all units wholly within 18 inches, is cast on a 10, which, I mean, obviously he can always do that, but it still can be knocked down, like unbound. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. And then Storm of Searing White Light, he basically just does mortal wounds. So he wants to kind of move up with the army, but man, it's hard to keep him safe. Like, I know if I put Teclis on the table, Jack Stormcast are going to just without any problem whatsoever. And so that's an issue. Let's see. 2+ stuff. Can a Infernal Rapturous force a reroll on the auto cast of 12? Jesse, that's a great question, and that's something we went back and forth with as I was talking to Jack and his brother Josh. We don't know. We need an FAQ for that, because you never rolled, it just counts as a 10. We're kind of there's arguments to be made on both sides. My example was if you're near the Blood Secretor, right, which makes you, or I think some corn thing makes you reroll successful spells. And so how does that interact with this? So that's one I need an FAQ on. I've already sent an email in asking about it. But that's about it. It's a great question, though, for sure. Because we both went down different lines of logic to be like, those both make sense. But yeah, so Teclis, he's big beat stick, but honestly, he's not that scary. He does have a sick weapon, though. His staff, 18-inch range, only one attack, but it's a 2-up, 2-up. -3 rend, d6 damage. He gets a last cannon strapped to his arm. And then him and his mount, really not super impressive. None of this army wants to be in a fight, to be honest with you. They're all book nerds. Thoughts on the twin stones with him, or just a normal mage? Yeah, so the twin stones, if you don't know, are a very strange endless spell that's very interesting. Where basically every time a spell is cast around him that's not unbound, by him I mean, sorry, the endless spell model, it kind of like saves up the charge up to a maximum of 6, and then when someone does go to cast a spell, you can put that number onto their spell ability. So like say they roll a 2, but there's 6 power saved up in the twin stones, they can put that 6 on the 2, and now it's an 8, and the spell goes off. So it's like a battery that you're charging up. For 30 points, I'll take it. That sounds awesome. The fact, Teclis doesn't need that kind of bonus, to be honest with you, but with everyone in the army being a wizard and casting spells, like, why not? So yeah. And he gets infinite unbinds, does he? Number of spells he can cast determined by using the ability on the left. Okay, he can attempt to unbind any number of spells in the enemy hero phase. Man, thanks for pointing that out. Man, that's nuts. But I like this. In terms of, he's 660. He's a huge model. 16 wounds, 4-up save, and sometimes, assuming it goes off, you'll have the protection of Teclis that keeps him safe, which is just a 5-up shrug. He's not hard to kill. He is exceedingly easy to kill for a big guy. And I like that. There's a risk reward to wherever you put him simply because of his base size and the amount of I don't know, juicing he does for the army. Gets him pumped. So I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of people who are overreacting when they see him on paper, and the second he's on the table and a Maw Crusher even hip taps him and he just explodes, I think people are going to be like, oh, yeah, it's fine. Alright, so next we're going to talk about the Light of Aetherion, my boy right here. Boom, got him built. Here's my little good luck charm there. And he's just kind of a melee blender, to be honest with you. His command ability is super sad. It is just, you can use his command ability to start the battle shock phase. If you do so, pick a friendly unit with this command ability. All friendly Realm Lords units wholly within 24 inches are treated as having bravery characteristic of 10. Okay. So he makes them all like demon-y. That's cool. Distraction Tecla effects. I love it. That's the best. If you proxy Bulgor as an Alarith stoneguard, anyone notice? Probably. I imagine they're not that big of a base. I thought on Teclis War Scroll it says you can add or subtract modifiers. Nope, you actually cannot. So when he chooses how many spells he casts, with all of them it says it cannot be modified. Straight up. But they are still casting attempts, of which there are up to 4 that could be dumped into that endless spell. So, yeah. Okay, and as far as this guy, he really is just, he is a hero that goes in and he messes stuff up. He's like a mini version of, oh, what's his name? What's the dwarf that everyone likes? Gotrek. There you go. Here is the Cathallar, the lady with her hair getting blown around. I'm not a huge fan of the model. I probably will not get one, or I'll get one and just convert something with the head. This is the only part I don't like. I don't like the way the wind looks sweeping past her hair. And she has, let's see, she does have one interesting ability that I think is really cool though. That's called emotional transference. At the start of the battle shock phase, you can pick one friendly Lumineth Realm Lord's unit wholly within 18 inches of this model and roll a die. On a 2-up, do not take a battle shock test for that unit. That's not super great. In addition, if any models from that unit were slain during that turn, you can pick one enemy unit within 18 inches of this model, and that has to take a battle shock test in that phase. If you do so, add the number of models from that friendly unit that were slain during that turn to the modified battle shock roll for the enemy unit. So if I have my block of 30 spearmen, which is not unreasonable, and I lose 6 of them, again, not hard to imagine. These guys are not tough. I lose 6 of them. When it comes time to do a battle shock, I don't do a battle shock over here, but instead I pick an enemy unit with 18 inches and they add 6, the number of guys who are dead from my unit, to their battle shock. In a book setup where Inspiring Presence costs you 2 command points. I think that's rad. Because it makes bravery relevant in a really cool way. It's not hair, it's a veil over her face. Oh, you're right. I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't really like it. I'm gonna put a witch elf from Drukari 40k on her. But thank you. Good conversation. Always love your content. Thank you so much, Katie. Very kind of you. Good old get wrecked Gunnarsson. Let's see. The lack of generic heroes is kind of sad in this book, but the named heroes are all kind of cool. Dustin, that's kind of where I'm at. People who know me know that I'm not someone who typically likes playing named characters, but the faction lore-wise is so small that these heroes really do go with them quite frequently. And that's the only thing where I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. Right, like Nagash, God of Death, is not going to show up to every single battle. But this dude, Eltharion, he absolutely would, because there's just not many battles happening. It's a very small force. So that's why I'm more okay with it. Now we're going to jump into some of the units. So again, I mentioned before, I'm most interested in the cavalry, because I have never had a full cavalry army, and I would love to do that. They do have a way of becoming battle line. For every unit of the spearmen you take, you can choose to make one unit of the Dawn Riders or the Archers battle line. And so what that means is if you buy 2 units of spearmen, okay, you can play any list you want, because they're both battle line and they can choose something else to be battle line. It meets all your battle line requirements. How many times can I say battle line? Very quickly, take a shot. So, with the Dawn Riders, we'll talk about why they're so cool. At the start of your combat phase, you can say this unit will use its Deathly Furrows ability. If you do so in that phase, you can either add 1 to the attack's characteristic of this unit's melee weapons, but it can only target targets that have a wound characteristic of 1 or 2 and do not have a mount. So, you pick them, and you're like, I'm going to give them +1 attack because they're hitting a unit that has 1 or 2 wounds and no horses. Okay, got it. Or you can add 2 to the attack's characteristic of this unit's melee weapons. Remember, it's plural profiles, but it can only target units that have a wound characteristic of 1 and do not have a mount. So what that functionally means is if you throw a 5-man unit of these into a chaff wall, right? Let's think a unit of clan rats, what are some other pink horrors? Trying to think of just other generic chaff units. Crypt ghouls, something like that. All of a sudden, all these things are getting +2 attacks. So they have the Sun Metal Lance. When they charge, it's just like any other lance weapon. It just gets better the turn you charge. And then also the Dashing Hooves. And so that turns each of them having 3 attacks. 1 with the lance, 2 with the horse, because the horses always do more damage. That's just the nature of fantasy games. That if you're attacking a 1-wound small model with no mount, all of a sudden it is 3 attacks with the lance and 4 attacks with the hooves. And so you go from 3 attacks to 7, functionally. And then the leader of the unit also has a sword, and he does get to use both of them. Yeah, he's armed with a Sun Metal Lance and a Guardian Sword. And so he jumps up to an additional 4, so he has 11 attacks. So isn't that nuts? And that's what I'm saying, where it's just like they are a unit. No, they have 2 wounds, a 4-up save. It's not anything to write home about. They all have a spell, Power of Hish, casting value of 6. If cast, the Sun Metal Weapons ability for the caster and or the unit. Basically, they do mortal wounds on a 6, and this spell says they do it on a 5 instead of a 6. It is what it is. Have we seen the art/painting section? No, no. For these kinds of videos where I sit and review the book, I typically focus on the units, and then I'll talk about the lore and stuff throughout the week when I do lore videos next week for them. But we can cover the paint section here in a bit. So, yeah, and that's all they are. The 14-inch move is huge. You can give them double movement. They can do mortal wounds if they hit on a 5 or a 6. And remember, you can take that battalion that gives them reroll 1s to hit. It just greatly amplifies the damage output they can do. They are not going to take a punch very well, though. I can tell you that. And that's going to be a theme you're going to see the rest of this book. It's a lot of things that can punch above their weight class, but they don't like taking a punch. And that, I think they did a good job. And so we were having that discussion earlier about that ability that makes you spend 2 command points to do a command ability rather than just 1. And that seems so punishing. And it will for the first turn, maybe 2. But the second you start blending through the units in this army, it's not going to seem so bad. And that's kind of why I leave a lot of wiggle room for judgment there. Next up, we have the sentinels. These are the bow guys who apparently need 3 strings to pull their bow back. I love it. Let's see. At the start of the shooting phase, you can pick 1 enemy unit within 30 inches of this unit's high sentinel that is not visible to them. If you do, you must choose the lofted missile characteristic for all attacks made with this unit's Austrian bow, but that enemy unit is treated as being visible to all friendly models from this unit to the end of the phase. So basically, they have 2 weapon profiles with the same weapon. You can choose to do each one. And basically what it's saying is you can just kind of shoot wild in the sky. It makes you hit less and it takes away the rend, but it gives you an opportunity to shoot something you can't actually see, which is cool. With all the stuff that's going on with like terrain and that kind of thing. That's cool. Before attacking with the Aurelian bow, choose either the aimed or lofted missile weapon characteristics. Of course, we just talked about that. They also have Sun Metal weapons, so a 6 does mortal wounds. What's interesting to note is that it does a mortal wound and the attack sequence ends. So it's not in addition to any other damage. That's very important. And that's something I think the first weeks when we start seeing this army show up at events, when events happen again, that mistake is going to be made. People are going to do mortal wounds, and then because popular units like Bloodletters and that kind of stuff, they in addition to they all just kind of scoop them up. So yeah. And then their magic does the same thing. It just does mortal wounds on a 5 instead of a 6. But again, 1 wound, 5-up save. They're paper. They're paper people. And then the wardens, as we talked about, they have the Sun Metal weapons, same thing as everyone else, does mortal wounds on a 5 or a 6. Once per battle, at the start of the combat phase, you can pick 1 enemy unit within 3 inches of this unit's high warden, their unit champion. On a 2-up, it suffers D3 mortal wounds. I don't know why it's there. It's just there. He just hucks a grenade as the enemy closes. If the target unit made a charge move in the same turn, add 1 to the wound rolls for attacks made with this unit's warden pikes. Improve the rend characteristic by 1. So they like charging a lot. And it's interesting. So they like charging. But if you go with the Shining Company thing where they get the -1 to hit, they can't charge. And so that's a good trade-off. You got to make some real decisions there. I like it quite a bit. Jacob says the trade-off between getting mortal wounds and the attack sequence ending is pretty reasonable. I agree. Yeah, because it depends target to target what you're going to want to do, especially if they have a shrug. Something like, disgusting resilient or something like that could definitely change your mind about what you want to do. And we're actually, believe it or not, so I'm not just droning on forever, we're actually almost done with the book. So just bear with me a little bit. We have the Stone Mage, who is our second choice for a non-named character. He's the Stone Monk who's just kind of sitting there meditating. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm just reading the chat here. So they play like elves. Actually, Bunt Pipser, the explanation I got from my local GW store manager up here in Linwood, Washington, was like he's like, this is the most elven-y book that they've ever made in terms of everyone has a specific purpose, a specific job to do. They're all really good at what they do, but you have to build a list that accounts for everything, and they're very magic focused. I was like, that's a glowing review. Let's see, Stone Mage stance. At the start of the combat phase, you can say that this model will adopt the Stone Mage stance. If you do so, this model and any friendly Alarith stoneguard, they're the cowboy, Teclis Longhorns, units within 12 inches of this model cannot make a pile-in move in that phase. However, they improve the Ren characteristic of melee weapons used by that model by 1. That's interesting. So there's a lot of choices to be made in this army. If your Stoneguard are mired in combat and they don't need to pile in really, perfect. If they need that to get a couple dudes into combat, it loses a lot of its effectiveness because it would be smarter to do multiple attacks rather than just getting the few that you have with a -1. So that's something. No, if they get charged. What are we talking about? Let's see. Wall of Blades. When Alorians stand shoulder to shoulder, they present a bristling wall. Yes, you are correct. I messed that up before. They don't like charging. They like being charged. Because it makes them nastier when you get stuck on the blades here. So, good call out, everybody. I missed that. If the target unit made a charge move in the same turn, add wound to the wound rolls for attacks made with this weapon's Warden Pikes. Yeah. You got it. Let's see. Yep, okay. A few folks pointed that out. I'm sorry I missed them, but yes, I corrected that here. They like being charged. Let's see. And what else does he have? Magic. What's his spell? Gravitic Redirection. Has a casting value of 5. Until your next hero phase, the caster can fly. Okay. In addition, you can pick one enemy unit within 18 inches of the caster. If you do so, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound, and until your next hero phase, the movement characteristic is halved and he cannot fly. Okay. So he just kind of, he plinks him in the armor and they get slower, basically. That's cool. It's fine. It's there. There's a lot of those spells in this book. Like, I picked out like the 4 or 5 that were like really standouts, but there's a lot of spells where you're like, huh, that is in fact an option that has been written on paper. I could do it, but it's just like not exciting. We'll go with the Stoneguard here, which again is a unit that I'm very, very excited for. I think it's gonna be a 5-man unit from what I've seen around. Let's see. A True Stone Seneschal can be armed with a pair of Stratum Hammers instead of the unit's weapon option. So, yeah, let's see. Wait, the unit is armed with one of the following weapon options: a Stone Mallet or a Diamond-Picked Hammer. Okay, so the unit has to choose one or the other, a Stone Mallet or a Diamond-Picked Hammer, but the Seneschal, specifically the leader, can have something different. This is weird. I can't think of many situations, but whatever. So let's look at those weapons. You either get 2 attacks or 3. No matter what, they always hit on 3s. One with fewer attacks hits on 3s. One with more hits on 4s. -1 rend on the hammer. Oh no, wait, that's the same. Stone Mallet or Diamond-Picked Hammer. Stone Mallet or Diamond-Picked Hammer. 2 attacks or 3 rend on 3s. 1 with fewer attacks hits on 3s. 1 with more hits on 4s. -1 rend on the hammer. Oh no, wait, that's the same. Stone Mallet or Diamond-Picked Hammer. Stone Mallet or Diamond-Picked Hammer. I see, I see. Nope, scrap all that. I'm totally wrong. So Stone Mallet or Diamond Hammer are the same profile. They just look different. They were just trying to articulate what's different on a model. Sorry about that. And then the hero, he has a separate weapon that he can choose, which doesn't seem very exciting at all. That's the one that hits more, but it's harder to wound with no rend, as opposed to the baseline weapon that everybody has, which is 2 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 and 1 damage. Not spectacular. One thing to note on these guys is they have a 4-up save and 2 wounds, so they are more tanky than the other units. Crushing Blow. If the unmodified hit roll for an attack made with a Stone Mallet is 6, add 1 to the damage inflicted. Okay, that's fine. I don't really like having to keep track of 6s, but whatever. If the unmodified hit roll for an attack with a Diamond Pick Hammer is 6, the attack inflicts 1 mortal wound on the target. Huh. You know what I just realized is that you can reroll. Okay, sorry. I just realized that this unit is not a wizard. I thought they were all wizards, but they are not. They are Alarith. Very interesting. So the Stone Cows and the Stone Guard are not wizards. Very, very interesting. Okay. They're not as killy as I thought they would be, but they really are more of the defensive bulwark. Because having a 4-up save, you remember you can give them ethereal. You can make their skin stone, so they can reroll save rolls. And they're 2 wounds each. They can be quite resilient. Let's see. I'm just going to read the chat here. Sorry. I really appreciate this run through of the Battletome. Oh, thank you so much. I'm biased, but I feel like this army plays to their flavor and lore, and I'm okay with it. Yep. That's kind of how I see it as well. Only the Valinar are all wizards. Interesting. Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'm interested in that. I didn't realize. I thought for sure they would have some way of buffing stuff up, but I like them. Then we go to the Spirit of the Mountain, and I have not read the lore explaining why there are mountain cows, but I am excited to get to that part. Basically, his command ability, used at the start of the combat phase. If you do so, pick one Alarith Elf unit, which would be these 2 over here. Hold within 18. Add 1 to the attack's characteristic of that melee weapon in the combat phase. A unit cannot benefit from this command ability more than once per battle. More than phase. And a unit cannot benefit from this ability and the Unshakable Faith of the Mountain command ability in the same phase, which I assume is the generic ones. Yeah. Cool. So they have a +1 to attack buff. Now, what I will say for the Stone Guard, there is a Storm Host equivalent that really emphasizes Alarith stuff. Alarith being all the mountain guys and stone-themed things. And so I would definitely crack into that for some more bonuses, because I do think that there is potential with them, even though, this is a small unit, 2 wounds each, not wizards. The only wizard with the Alarith is the Stone Mage. There's still a lot of potential to be had. As far as this guy goes, he has a 3-up save, 12 wounds. If this model does not make a charge move in your charge phase, add 1 to the attack's characteristic of this model's melee weapons. And he has 2 melee weapons. He has his hammer and the hooves. He can step on you. As well as Geomantic Blast. He has a ranged shot. At the end of, so we'll do Ponderous Advice. At the end of your hero phase, you can pick 1 friendly Lumineth Realmlord's elf hero, okay, within 3 inches of this model. If that hero is within 3 inches of this model at the start of your next hero phase, that is so confusing. Then that hero can use a command ability in that turn without spending any command points. So, say on turn 1, I have my mountain boy and a hero next to him. And then at the start of the next turn, if I still have them next to him, the idea narratively is that Big Cow's been like, hey buddy, you should really do this. And he tells him what to do, and so he doesn't have to spend a command point on it. Very strange. I mean, I guess it's just a way of making sure that you're tied to each other. Like, they're trying to articulate a way to be like, keep your hero next to the mountain guy. It just seems weird. Let's see. And then we'll go Stoneheart Shockwave at the start of the enemy shooting phase, and at the start of any combat phase, you can pick one enemy unit within range of this model's Stoneheart Shockwave ability, which starts at 12, goes down to 4. If you do so, subtract 1 from hit rolls for that unit until the end of that phase. A unit cannot be affected by this ability more than once per phase. Very, very interesting. So this would stack with the -1 from a Shining Company. So if you had a wall of Shining Company guys and him behind him, the Shining Company gives them a -1, and then he can project a -1 onto something that's likely to charge into them. So that, yeah, -2 to hit is savage and not fun. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't really like minuses to hit. Yeah, I like 1. I think there should be a cap. I know 40k, there's rumors about them doing that as far as a cap on how many negative modifiers to hit you can do. Because -2 is just no fun. -1 is like, oh, this is a weird kind of defense. But when you start getting in up with the minuses, it stops being fun. Anyway, that's my opinion. Stone Mage Symbiosis. When you look up the value on this model's damage table, if this model is within 12 inches of a friendly Stone Mage, this model is treated as having 0 suffered wounds. That is awesome. So, yeah, if you take Mountain Boy with a Stone Mage, he's always operating on his best profile, which is his ability to shoot out the... it increases the range of his gun. He has a one-shot thing, kind of like Teclis does. He does 5 damage with his hammer at his top profile, and 12-inch range on the -1 thing. That's nuts. You're going to have the Stone Mage guy behind him almost the entire game. Exactly, yeah. Yep. But what's cool is that he doesn't have a command ability, and so he doesn't benefit from... Like, they didn't make it so, like, obvious to make them a duo. You want some other hero with a command ability next to him. And the last thing, so that is the... Is that the named one? No, that's the generic one, right? So what are you? Alarith, Spirit of the Mountain. Yes, so he is just a behemoth. The last entry to cover, he is the named variant of the Cow Mountain. I kind of get him confused because there's not like a ton of pictures. There's just this one. He has the same thing where if he doesn't move, he gets +1 to his attacks. Unmodified hit roll of 6, does a mortal wound in addition to other damage, which is different than the other ones we've covered in this army. He has the same thing as, like, as far as giving a free command ability out without you spending command points if the hero moves with him over time. Subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by enemy models while they're within range of the Guardian of Hish ability. Yep, which is his version of the -1 to hit bubble. Same thing with the Stone Mage. Command ability is the same. So what are you really paying for? What's the difference? He has more wounds. And he's a little more fighty. Yeah, he's got more attacks. Damage 5. Yeah, okay. His damage output is bigger. That's really what it is. Let's see. I think it's a workaround to keep you from giving the spirit an artifact since the named one can't take one anyway. Interesting. Yeah, that's a great point, y'all. It is weird. So, yeah. Let me see. And that is basically it. We have our endless spells, and I've already touched on one of them. The one's a spell battery, where basically the more you cast, you keep a tally, and then you can put that tally onto a unit to give it a bonus. So if you have cast 6 spells near this thing, you can then give a +6 modifier to a nearby unit who's trying to cast, which is sweet. The Sanctum of Amontok. Basically, I'm going to see if you guys can see on the camera. It's this weird triangle mini wildwood thing, and you basically build it around the caster. And as long as it's there, subtract 1 from hit rolls and add 1 to save rolls for attacks that target this model. And it's kind of like a oh, what was that stupid vortex where it's like a disc that comes up and you put your guy on top of it. It's kind of the same thing, but it's built around him. In addition, at the end of the combat phase, if this model was targeted by any enemy attacks during that phase, roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3 inches of this model. On a 1 to 3, nothing happens. On a 4 to 5, it suffers 1 mortal wound. On a 6, it suffers D3. I'm not really a huge fan of it because, let's see, if the caster is slain, the sanctum is dispelled. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't strike me as being super interesting. I don't know if Teclis fits inside, because rules from deployment make it seem as though it would be too tight for him, but I haven't actually seen the model, and I haven't seen it next to anything to really get a good size comparison. I don't think he would fit, but I think everything else except for the Mountain King would, wouldn't it? I think he'd just... Balewind Vortex, thank you, Jacob. Coming in hot. How would Goreheads look on the elves? That might be cool. I might check that out. And the last one is Rune of Petrification, which is casting value of 8. Set it up wholly within 18 inches of the caster. At the start of the movement phase, and at the end of the movement phase, roll a dice for each unit that's within 6 inches of this model. On a 4-up, it suffers D3 mortal wounds. In addition, subtract 1 from run and charge rolls for units within 6 inches of this model, and it has no effect on Realm Lords. So it's a debuff / no-go zone for your opponent, and I think it's like 30 points. Rune of Petrification. No, that one's 70. I don't know. I have to think about that one. That's a tougher one, because I'm not one of those people who thoroughly understands movement, abilities and that kind of stuff. I don't know. That's one I got to hold on to in my brain. D3 mortal wounds. If there's a lot of units in play and you plop it right down, it does several mortal wounds, and then all of those units get slower in it. But it's -1 to charge and run. What do you guys think in the chat? Very strange. I will say this book does have 2 narrative missions in it that I am actually excited to try. And let's see. The Storm Host equivalents. Can the Cow Mountain be garrisoned? No. No, I wish. That would be incredible. Can you imagine if we could climb on top of him? Isn't the Comet better than that? The Stormcast Comet? Yes, it is. But the Comet mostly focuses on doing mortal wounds over time, whereas it does mortal wounds, and then the side effect is that you have a -1 to run and charge. So I would say yes if you're looking for mortal wound output. If you're looking for something that restricts movement, it's sort of like an in-between between the Comet from Stormcast and the Chains endless spell that slows things down. So I don't know. My favorite though is the Twin Stones by far. The fact that you're a magic army, darn near everything can cast spells, and you just have to save up the energy. That's awesome. Let's see. Rather than being a direct effect spell, more of an area denial thing. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Where it's this weird in between. It does do direct damage, but I think its bigger thing is having this bubble where units are not as good at running and charging. All I have to say, 70 points seems pricey for that, but we'll see. So, actually, we'll touch on points here real quick. And I also want to talk about army building. The wardens, your basic spear guys, max out at a unit of 30. 120 points. There are absolutely no max unit discounts in this army, which I am okay with. I actually want them to move away from max unit discounts in armies that are not thematically horde armies. This is specifically what I'm saying. So like Skaven, Fire Slayers, they could still have them. Undead. But units that are armies that are not specifically themed to be horde based, get them out of there. That's what I say. That's personal opinion. Anyway. And with the wardens, as I said, for each wardens unit, you can include 1 Vanari sentinels, bow guys, or Dawn Riders unit as battle line. So that is super unique that they have one to unlock others. And I will say that this is something that I wish they had implemented back in the Skaven book. The Skaven book, it really frustrated me how hard it was to build a list that I thought was really cool, that I wanted to build thematically for my own little, I don't know, Skaven army. But this being able to say, like, you know what, here's the core of your army. It's wardens, right? It's just the guy with spears. They're the regular militia. They walk out with everybody, and they enable you to do cool things. There's nothing in this army that's like, if this hero is your general, then it unlocks blank. The only thing even close to that is one of the sub-factions turns the stoneguard into battle line, the one that's super focused on Alarith, the stone-themed word. So I think that's pretty reasonable. I like it quite a bit. Battalions, what's that big one? So they're all 120. All the ones that you would take, because the only one that's 80 is the Uber battalion. It's like 5,000 points. Yeah. One last thing to note: they cannot ally with Stormcast. This is interesting. They are an order battletome, and their only allies are Deepkin. And so, one of the things we were chatting about last night as I was hanging out with Jack is what could Deepkin offer this army with the 400-point ally band? And it turns out darn near everything in that army is like under 400 points. They don't have a whole lot that's like super big. And so it's just kind of an interesting thought experiment. Stuff like the highly defensive eels would be super effective here because, like I said before, not a lot of stuff here can take a punch. So if you can pin down an enemy with, defenses that can really last a turn, at least a turn, I think that would be super cool. I also think, what else? Some of the heroes might be super interesting. I have to go look at the Deepkin book again a little bit more. I think it's here collecting dust somewhere. But very interesting stuff. You can fit the turtle, you can fit the eidolons, you can fit pretty much anything you want. I'm half tempted to buy 4 alapexes and just have sharks for days. So let's see. Here we go. Now we're going to dive, now that we have some context for the troops, I wanted to dive into the sub-factions. Since we covered the War Scrolls, I'm going to pause here for a sec. Does anyone have any questions about any of the War Scrolls before we move on? The battalions were pretty straightforward, I feel like. And that's nice, actually. I'll leave it here for a second so you guys can ask questions. Give you about 30 more seconds before I start moving on if I don't hear anything. People are saying that the Lumineth and Ideneth should be enemies, so the ally thing is not lore appropriate. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. That is, the second there was like a leaked image of this page, I think it was like in German or something, and we saw Deepkin, it made me super interested in reading the lore to figure out what justifies that. And so I haven't gotten there yet, so I don't know. I can't answer it now, but I promise you, Winter XL, it is going to be a big point that I focus on doing lore videos, because it's something that super interests me. Because my gut reaction is like, why aren't these guys all trying to kill him? Basically. Yeah. Mountain Moo Shark Attack. Big fan of that combo. Adds a lot of movement too. Exactly, that's what I was thinking. They can move up the board. They can provide some shooting. They're annoying if you don't deal with them. Do Teclis and Eltharion get great nations? I don't believe so. Let's double check here. It should be on the... Wait, did I skip it? Aha. Okay, when you choose Lumineth Rumlord Army, you can give it a Great Nation keyword. If a model already has a Great Nation keyword on its war scroll, it cannot gain another. This does not preclude you from including the unit in your army. Huh. I don't see one. Order Elf, Lumineth Rumlords, here at Teclis. Huh. I don't see anything that says they can't. Off the top of my head. And if it's here, I'm just missing it. But when you choose a Lumineth Rumlords army, you can give them a keyword. All Lumineth Rumlords in your army gain that keyword. Unless they already have one. But I didn't see any that already had one. Maybe maybe the named bull. It would make sense if he was tied to the, yeah. Okay, yes. So from my understanding, you can. Teclis and Eltharion, I believe, can be given great nations, but the named mountain cow guy, he already has a keyword here. So he's the only one who can't. Let's see. Self-importance is seemingly necessary. Exactly. Let's see. Okay, perfect. Great question. So now we're going to talk about the great nations themselves. And we're actually going to start off with the one that does involve Super Cow. So this is the faction that's based all around the Alarith, the mountain cow guys and the stone guard and that kind of stuff. The Enduring as Rock battle trait on page 67, which is, if you remember, the one that says if any Alarith units are hit with a -1 or -1 rend weapon, it's counted as -0. It changes the rend characteristic of an attack that targets an Alarith unit from this, in the mountain stance to dash. Okay, this is a really dumb way of wording this, and I'm sorry. So here's what it is. I had to think about this for a second. You have your Alarith unit, and they all have that kind of like mountain stone stance thing they can do, where they count -1 weapons as dash. What this is saying is you can do that, and in addition, you can count -2 weapons, rend of 2 weapons, as -1. That's all it really does, is it just adds that next layer of subtracting 1. If you get hit by a rend 3 weapon, you're out of luck, but you were out of luck anyway, let's be honest. So, yeah. The command ability here, it just makes them a little bit more survivable against higher end armies, which is not bad. Not bad at all. You can use this command ability at the end of the combat phase. If you do so, pick one friendly Ymetrica Alarith unit that has just forced an enemy unit to move using the Tectonic Force battle trait. Again, that's the one where you push him back 2 inches. You can use the Tectonic Force battle trait for a second time by picking one other enemy unit within 1 inch of that friendly unit. So yeah, if you have one unit and they get pushed on by 2 enemy units, they've pushed one before, and now they can push a second one back. Which, it's alright. I mean, that one... the only thing is this is one of those rules that in theory sounds really cool, but in practice, I don't want to make my opponent move units 2 inches back. It just sounds very frustrating and time consuming. So I don't know. We'll see how things pan out. I'm just also a crotchety old man who doesn't have time for anything, so it's whatever. Command trait. General must have this command trait, Almighty Blow. When this general fights, instead of piling in and attacking, you can say they will unleash a single Almighty Blow. If you do so, pick one enemy unit within 1 inch of this general and roll a die. On a 2-up, it suffers D3 mortal wounds. It's not great, but remember, this command trait only matters if you're taking a not named character as your general, which would be your Stone Mage, most likely, because it's the Stone Guy themed army. And so what I would say is that he doesn't want to be in combat, so just having the opportunity to be like, you know what, D3 mortal wounds, he's not good in combat, that's fine. You know, it's whatever. And the first hero must receive this artifact. Mountain's Gift. Once per phase, you can add 1 to the damage inflicted by one attack made with that weapon. In addition, roll a dice each time you allocate a wound or a mortal wound to the bearer. On a 6, that mortal wound is negated. In addition, each time the bearer is affected by a spell or endless spell, roll a 5 up and you ignore it. That is the best artifact in the game. Because there's so many abilities that just stack. So you get +1 damage to one of your attacks. You get a 6 up shrug. And on a 5 up, you ignore the spell, any spell effects. That's just a lot. There's like a lot of things going on there. Interesting. Not my fave, but interesting nonetheless. Now we have the great nation of Siar. Gleaming Brightness. This is the one where they start with 2 Ether Quartz reserves instead of 1. Again, I think this is going to be the one you see a lot. If I'm perfectly honest with you, it's going to be them or the Zaytrek. But we'll see. We'll see. Command ability. You can use the command ability when a friendly CR unit could use an Ether Quartz reserve ability, even if any friendly CR units have already done so in that turn. Remember, you can only do this once per phase with the Ether Quartz. That unit can use one of its Ether Quartz reserves. So basically, the command ability, you spend a command point and you let another unit use Ether Quartz in the same phase, which is cool. I mean, if you plan it to have like a big monstrous effect, so like you got the enemy right where you want them and you got 2 big squads of bowmen, have them both unleash the +1 to hit, volley, and just go nuts. The command trait. At the start of the combat phase, you can pick 1 enemy hero within 6 inches of the general. That enemy hero can only target this general in that phase. In addition, you can add 1 to the hit rolls for attacks that target that enemy hero. So basically, yeah, you just point a guy out and you're like, I'm coming for you! And now it's like 2 wrestlers on WWE who just kind of keep yelling at each other instead of like actually fighting because it's 6 inches away. So it's like, it's the start of the combat phase. All you're doing is stopping an enemy hero from punching anything else. I love it. Which, you know, it could be really good because it can lock up a hero, right? If they don't have a way within the combat phase specifically of getting within 6 inches of you, they can't attack anything else. That neuters quite a few big heroes. Interesting. Their artifact of power. Pick one of the bearer's melee weapons. An unmodified hit roll of 3 up for an attack made with that weapon always hits the target. An unmodified wound roll always wounds the target. And an unmodified save roll of 3 or less made by that weapon always fails. So it just locks in the math for that. Again, artifacts. Can't take it on some of the killier characters we have because they're named, but interesting nonetheless to me. The one that I haven't really mentioned at all is Iliatha. Add 2 to the bravery characteristic of Vanari Iliathra. This is kind of the infantry focused one, by the way. I'll kind of give my closing thoughts here in a little bit once I finish these 2, but keep that 2 bravery in mind. Unity of Purpose, which is their second ability they get. After a friendly Vanari unit loses a command ability, or uses a command ability, you can pick 1 other friendly Vanari unit within 3 inches of that unit. If you do so without spending, if you do so, that other unit can use that command ability without spending any command points. Oh, that's a mouthful. There's a lot of these that are just a mouthful. Okay, so if Vanari unit uses a command ability, pick 1 other friendly Vanari unit within 3 inches of that unit, and he can use a command ability without spending any command points. But I don't think we have a lot of super interesting, because he's not Vanari. So Teclis has no command ability. Altharian is not a Vanari, so he can't be a part of it. She has no command ability. They have no command ability. They're just troops. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess if you had two Spirit of the Mountains, they could both... I mean, they're both picking a unit and giving +1 to attack, so that's super good. We just don't have a lot of command ability options here. Interesting. Almost none in the entire flippin' book. And command ability. You can use this command ability in your shooting phase and combat phase. If you do so, pick one Vanari unit with 2 or more models. You can reroll hit rolls of 1 for that unit. So that's cool. So what you could do is go friendly. Yeah, so you can take him. Your general uses the command ability to give them reroll ones to hit. If there is another hero nearby, specifically I would probably go with the Alarith, Spirit of the Mountain. He can also give them +1 attacks for free because that second command ability is free. That can be used by one of your 2 wizards. Yeah. Alright, and then Artifact of Power. The first time the bearer is slain, before removing them from the battlefield, roll a die. On a 1 through 3, the bearer is slain. On a 4 up, the bearer is not slain. All wounds allocated them are healed. And anything that's left to be allocated is negated. So just, boom, straight up Phoenix. Okay, and then there is the last one is the Great Nation of Zertrick, which isn't... Whenever I read this, I think Zyrtec, which is definitely like an anxiety medication or something. Lambient Mystics, add 1 to the first casting, dispelling, or unbinding rolls you make for each friendly wizard. So your first spell is super good. In addition, each wizard hero knows 1 extra spell from the appropriate lore. So that's actually good. It opens your toolbox quite a bit. Their command trait. This general can attempt to unbind 1 extra spell in the enemy hero phase. In addition, the second time that a general attempts to unbind a spell, you can re-roll the unbinding. Why it's specifically the second attempt and not the first, I'm like, I don't... Okay, what a strange thing to have to keep track of, but alright, I'm on board. The artifact you receive, roll a dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to the bearer. Add 2 to the roll if Teclis is part of your army and on the battlefield. On a 6 up, that wound or mortal wound is negated. So, yeah, if you did build a list based on magic use, which you'd want Teclis there because he gives you a +1 as well. Every first casting roll you do is +2, pretty much. And then he would give you a 4-up super save to wherever your artifact bearer is. And then what's cool about them, instead of having command ability, they have a new spell that's added to them. So Zertrick Wizards, which is anyone who can cast a spell in this army, know the following spell in addition to any others. Overwhelming Heat. Overwhelming Heat, casting value 7. If cast, pick 1 enemy unit wholly within 24 inches of the caster and visible to them. Have the movement characteristic of that unit until your next hero phase. Then, roll a dice. If the roll is equal to or greater than the unit's save characteristic, the unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. The real value here is slowing people down. I'm going to pause there. I'm going to kind of collect my thoughts a little bit. We're gonna do some closing bits and bobs. I'm going to open it up for questions one last time. If you have anything, now this is a total questionnaire. If there's any questions about the book before I wrap it up, you let me know. While you guys are typing in your questions, I just want to say, every single time Games Workshop releases a new Battletome, they improve the painting section. This actually to me is actually a really big deal because as I've been reading more and more 40k codexes, they don't have any of this stuff, and it just makes this game seem so much more accessible. I don't know. I really like it. I wish they did. So, I still haven't decided what scheme I want to do, what paint scheme. I definitely don't want to do the Immetrica, these ones, because that's kind of how I painted my Grey Knights. So I want to do something a little bit different. But all in all, I'm pretty happy. John Penn says Emerald Life Swarm and Chronomatic Cogs. Cogs could be fantastic for this army. Life Swarm. Life Swarm could be good. Most of the stuff's single wound, absolutely. Yeah, I could see that. I would try it. How about that? I would definitely try that. When can we buy the book from Azir? No idea. They did not give us any kind of ETA. As far as when the sorry, my neighbors had a weird thud. How ridiculously long is the pikes, and how do you plan on transporting them? Gondor, that is the best question. We measured it out. Each pike is exactly 4 inches. Okay, that's long. It is like very long. As far as transporting, I don't think this will ever be an army that I'll ever take anywhere far away. For me, I'm going to basically probably get a magnetic case for them. I can't fathom trying to pluck that 4-inch spear, you know, because if you take 20 of them, oh my gosh, that's so much real estate because they're so big. So I don't know. 40k, they don't have to try very hard. They've already got people to buy 1 million point Space Marines. It's true. It is true. But I think they do a fantastic job. So I'm going to move into my final thoughts here. And I'm just going to wax poetically. I think this is a very cool army. The lore that I have read, I have found to be incredibly interesting. I'm going to turn this light off. I do think, instead of thinking of this as like I'm playing an army like you're playing Stormcast with all the different kinds of troop choices and, you know, a tactical need for every unit that exists, I want you all to think of this more as Teclis' bodyguard. And I don't mean that from a lore perspective. I mean, it seems like this army really pushes you into taking named characters that have awesome synergies with those characters. The kind of things that if this was a much larger faction, you would still see maybe like as his, like, you know, command entourage or something like that. The dividing the book between Vanari, the basic dudes, which are very, very close to High Elves, and the Alarith, which is the mountain themed stuff, I thought was really cool. There's some cool synergies. I love the great nation that really focuses on the cow guys. They also, and I do know this, they left it open for easy expansion. In the cow guys, the mountain ones, that exists because high elves like meditated and focused. They're more of like an elemental than they are an actual cow or an actual mountain. So what I'm saying is there could be elementals of other things, fire, sea, you know, that kind of stuff. So the range has a built-in way to have a lore-friendly expansion for new units and that kind of stuff in the future. They have a lot of ways to debuff your opponent. Okay, they can, obviously the command point one is the biggest. Making every command ability cost 2 command points is huge. There is minus to hits. There's a few ways to get -1 to hit. There are the Ether Quartz things, which allow you to punch above your weight class. What I'm saying is, this is an army that's going to debuff your opponent quite a bit in a few ways, having their movement here and there, that kind of stuff. But the problem is, once the enemy hits you, these guys are made of paper. They are made of the finest of paper. This is not, they're not going to be built around to last, you know? I mean, at best, their toughest infantry troop, 2 wounds and a 4-up save, that's a Chaos Warrior. Like, it's a Chaos Warrior. It's their most elite, survivable, tough dude is the basic troop of Chaos. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of ways to go with the faction. I think, obviously, I mean, if you're not someone who's into the hero phase when it comes to using magic, you're not going to like this book. If you like having unit diversity, you're not going to like this book. For me personally, looking at it, I'm going to focus on cavalry, because that really is what interests me the most. I would have loved to have a hero model that's on a cav. Like maybe I don't even know if it's just one of these guys riding an actual bull. That would be totally fine with me. But a hero that can keep up really well with the cavalry besides Teclis would have been nice. Other than that, I'm very excited for it. I think it's an army that just by looking at the rules that we see, it forces your opponent to make a lot of decisions, and that's good, right? But they don't have a lot of killing power behind that. So it's going to be a lot of being dodgy, scenario play, and screwing up your opponent's plans rather than taking objectives from them because you're just wiped out their units or anything like that. And that's definitely my opinion so far. And that's kind of when someone asked right at the beginning, Doug, how competitive do you think they're going to be? Again, I'm not a competitive player. I can't stress that enough. But just from what I've seen, they strike me much more as being a spoiler army who can ruin other armies' plans. But when I look at some of like the top competing lists, like they don't have the ability to clear chaff the same way. They have the Dawnguard Riders for sure, but if you stuff up enough stuff with like after saves, like the elite Fire Slayer dudes, they're gonna do nothing to them. Like straight up. I mean, there are a lot of questions this book asks, but there's a lot of questions that other armies ask that this one can't answer. So, although I will say that if you do run into that Fire Slayer, I can't remember what they're called, basically the elite troops that have their super save if a hero is nearby, making them move half the speed is a gut punch. Straight up. And I know that other channels like the Honest Wargamer, and there were a few others, came up with lists and stuff like that. I don't have a list yet, I'll be honest with you. I kind of just wanted to absorb the lore first and build a thematic army from there. Yeah, so I'm excited about it. So I'm going to go ahead and just go back to the normal cam and we can just chat. If you have any final thoughts, go ahead and throw them in there, and we'll wrap up the show here. There we are. So let's see. Christian Moeller, except for the cowmen with a 4-up ethereal roll-up save. Yeah, I mean, but they're not an infantry. Sorry, I was trying to think of like an infantry choice is what I was getting at. Yeah, I don't know. So you guys are echoing a lot I'm saying. They can swing above their weight class, like you guys are pointing out. Yeah, the bowman, 20 bowmen getting mortals on 5-ups will delete support heroes. Like, it's absolutely true. The thing is that once something touches this army, they're not going to be around very long. Like, I would be very surprised. Like, when I play my Maggotkin, this is probably a better example, something a little more tangible. When I play my Maggotkin, my goal is to just outlast you. I'm going to throw a bunch of bugs in your face, and I'm going to sit on objectives and ask if you can grind me off of them. With this, they're asking a lot of questions up front of like, how well does your army work when you're kind of handicapped when it comes to command abilities or movement values and things like that. But if you can reach them, they will die. Like, just die. Do you think the units in this box are what will be the inevitable start collecting? Maybe. I don't know. I was actually talking about that. I was like, this is going to be a hard box to do a start collecting for because of the lack of named heroes. I wouldn't be surprised if they swapped Eltharion out for the lady with the veil on her face as the hero because her model would be smaller and cheaper. By the way, this dude, Eltharion, he's on a 50 mil base. He's a chunky boy. I like it. I didn't realize that. I thought he was like on a 32 or something. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was this same set, a unit of the Cav, a unit of the Spearman, because then you could still have 2 battle line. And then you have a small hero that would be pretty cheap to produce, I'd imagine. So, those are my thoughts. Like, I do like the army. It plays in a very unique way. It rewards you for basically just throwing as much salt and shade at you as your opponent as you possibly can and ruining their plans, which is awesome. And I look forward to taking them to my local events when those start back up. Because I'm never in danger of winning a tournament, but I would love to be the guy who knocked off the dude who was. Because, I don't know, it just sounds fun. I could also see a start collecting box of a Stone Mage, 5 Alarith, and 10 Sentinels. Yeah, that's another great choice for sure. Absolutely. So, friends, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you all so much for watching and joining me. I hope you enjoyed my review of the Battletome. Again, not tomorrow, but starting next Monday is going to be the Laurel Week for the Lumineth, and I hope that you will join me for that. So thank you all so much, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.